Top 10 lists are the subjective opinion of an author. Don't let the numbering fool you, because they don't weigh any more than another person's opinion. Yet in some ways they can be useful in judging where the cultural consensus of a game is. Go through any number of top 10s for Super Mario and you'll tend to find similar entries in the top and bottom of the list. And at the bottom, or close to it, you'll often find Super Mario Bros. 2. I love Super Mario 2. It was the one I spent the most time with growing up. But its position as an oddity for the franchise has hurt the long-term placement of it within the series. Many don't consider it a real Mario game due to its nature as a port of Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic. October 2018 marks the 30th anniversary of Super Mario 2 in the United States. Today we're going to take a look at the journey the game took to getting made. Welcome to Arcadeology, the 30th anniversary of Super Mario Bros. 2. Imagine being a kid who gets a job at Nintendo. You work your way up and play every game along the way. Soon, the leadership trusts you enough to request your opinion on new games. You become the game master. Well, that's what happened to Howard Phillips before the dream even really existed. Phillips' position with Nintendo put him in a great spot. His job included playing games and determining if they would be a fit in the North American market.
I am game master for Nintendo, and that means I play all the games that we come out with. I help develop all the games and basically make sure that Nintendo makes the games as fun as possible.
One day in 1986, he received a copy of Super Mario Bros. 2. He popped the disc into his Famicom and fired it up, only to find that the game wasn't fun at all. It was difficult and unfair.
As I continued to play, I found that Super Mario Bros. 2 asked me again and again to take a leap of faith, and that each of those leaps resulted in my immediate death. This was not fun gameplay, it was punishment. Undeserved punishment.
Howard Phillips, from the foreword of Boss Fight Books, Super Mario Bros. 2. How could this have come from the makers of Super Mario Bros.? If you look back at the Japanese release of Super Mario Bros. 2 now in a post-Super Mario Maker world, the difficulty might seem quaint. The subculture that thrives on hardcore platforming is as large as it's ever been, with mods like Kaizo Mario and sadistic Mario Maker levels not only drawing many players, but viewers on YouTube and Twitch. There is a finer appreciation for difficulty in the United States in present day that didn't quite exist in 1986. Super Mario Bros. Was released in late 1985 and was a worldwide phenomenon. The exact date of release in the United States is up for debate. However, Frank Cifaldi of Gamasutra was able to nail down an October to November release window. A version for Nintendo's Versus arcade platform was soon in the works. In essence, the Versus arcades were Famicom hardware inside of an arcade cabinet. This version of the game never made it to the United States, but Nintendo advertised it at one point to arcade distributors as Versus Mario's Adventure. Versus Super Mario Bros. Was almost the same game as the original with some difficult stages added. It was an arcade game, so there had to be those levels that gobbled up dollars and yen. The massive success of Super Mario Bros. Warranted a sequel. Shigeru Miyamoto, though, would be unable to direct the game himself. His role as manager of Nintendo's R&D 4 division, as well as his work on The Legend of Zelda, consumed all his time. Miyamoto offloaded the responsibility for the sequel to Takashi Tezuka. Tezuka used the difficult levels from Versus Super Mario Bros. As a jumping-off point for the new game. This version of Super Mario Bros. Would be a challenge for those that had mastered the first one. They added new elements such as inclement weather, precision platforming, and poison mushrooms. It was these elements that prompted Howard Phillips to suggest they decline bringing the sequel to Super Mario Bros. To the United States. Minoru Arakawa took Phillips' suggestion to heart, and he made the call to his father-in-law, Nintendo President Hiroshi Yamauchi. For many years, I heard that the game was too difficult for American audiences. The real reason is more nuanced than that. As we've discussed, Howard Phillips felt the game was not only difficult, but unfair. What was its perception in Japan? Well, Super Mario Bros. 2 didn't have the same impact as the first game. A big reason was the decision to release the game on the disk system, which was a peripheral for the Famicom. According to Boss Fight Books, in both 1985 and 1986, the guide to the original Super Mario Bros. Was the best-selling book in Japan. The guide for Super Mario Bros. 2 didn't even crack the top 30. The marketing for the game made it clear that it was for hardcore players.
スーパーマリオブラザーズ2はさすがディスクで面白い。下手くそ。
Shigeru Miyamoto, in an interview for the 25th anniversary of Super Mario Bros., had this to say: "We thought it would be fun if the levels got even harder, and we worked on it. They were a lot of fun. Of course, it was fun because we made the game, and we're used to playing. And we weren't sure if this would be fun for people who had never played." Miyamoto's R&D 4 was tasked with finding a replacement sequel for the North American audience. Unfortunately, they didn't quite have the bandwidth to begin a new project. The sequels to The Legend of Zelda and Super Mario Bros. 3 were off on the horizon, so it would be a few years. Around this time in 1986, Miyamoto hired Kensuke Tanabe. His first project was working with SRD to develop a prototype for a vertical platforming game. SRD is a partner company of Nintendo, responsible for a lot of the programming work. There have been several stories about the nature of the prototype, yet as recently as a few years ago, Tanabe confirmed that they intended this prototype to be used for a Mario game. At the time, though, it wasn't going anywhere. The vertical platforming elements were not enough to justify its own game, so it was shelved. Meanwhile, on the geopolitical stage, the United States and Japan were negotiating a treaty to prevent Japan from dumping low-cost microchips into the United States market. The goal of the treaty was to give the U.S. chip manufacturers more of a fighting chance. They reached a deal in late July of 1986, and it would last for 5 years. More on this in a bit. In 1987, Fuji Television wanted to hold a gigantic multimedia festival called Yume Kojo. The English name was The Dream Machine, even if the phrase directly translates to Dream Factory. From what I've read and seen, it was almost comparable to a World's Fair that focused on multimedia. The mascots for the festival were a Middle Eastern family, led by a boy named Imogen, which is a play on the word imagine. If you want more information on the event itself, definitely check out GTV's video on it. Fuji wanted a tie-in game for the festival and approached Nintendo to produce it. Miyamoto assigned Kensuke Tanabe to this tie-in game as the director. Tanabe used Miyamoto's suggestions of mixing classic Mario-style horizontal platforming in with the vertical segments. The resulting game was Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic. Doki Doki, for those who don't know, is the Japanese onomatopoeia for a heartbeat. Nintendo released it for the Disk System, and it was a pretty big hit. It featured the 4 mascot characters of the festival: Imogen, Mama, Papa, and Lena, each with their own strengths. Imogen was well-rounded. Mama could jump the highest. Papa was the strongest. And Lena could float through the air. Sounds familiar, right? Miyamoto still needed to find a replacement for Super Mario Bros. 2 in the United States, and there was no better conversion candidate than Doki Doki Panic. The game had Mario already in its DNA. Things like invincibility stars and POW blocks make an appearance, and Super Mario Bros. Composer Koji Kondo wrote the score. The most noticeable changes were graphical. Mario replaced Imogen, Luigi replaced Mama, Toad replaced Papa, and Peach replaced Lena. Additionally, the waterfall graphic was slowed down as the previous incarnation was ice-draining. Magic lamps were replaced with potions, and heart containers were replaced with mushrooms. There was a run button added because what is Mario without the ability to run? Another gameplay change was removing the need for each character to complete the level, simplifying the game quite a bit. They also removed the opening cutscene in favor of scrolling text to catch you up on the story. Additionally, the interstitial screens between levels received an update. The game score was also tweaked quite a bit. For comparison, here's the overworld score for Doki Doki Panic. As you might be able to tell, Kondo played more with instrumentation for Super Mario Bros. 2, and also added a complete second refrain to the music, giving it a little more depth and variety. The subspace theme was also replaced from this to this, the original Mario theme. The Underworld theme was also tweaked. In the original game, it's a lot faster and it's missing something. See if you can tell what it is. And here's the final version from Super Mario Bros. 2. Yes, he added drums in Super Mario Bros. 2, and it fills out the song nicely. Also, the invincibility music was changed to the Mario Star music. One of the things that I like to point out, this is the first time in a game that Mario and Luigi are graphically differentiated, other than color. In this instance, Luigi's face is longer and slimmer. This appears to be based on an anime that had been released the year prior, titled Super Mario Bros. The Great Mission to Rescue Princess Peach, though for some reason Luigi is wearing blue overalls and a yellow shirt. When Howard Phillips received the new version of Super Mario Bros. 2, he recognized immediately as Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic. It was a game he had already played and enjoyed. He felt that it would be the perfect replacement. Nintendo of America geared up to release the game, building buzz with commercials and putting it on the cover of the very first issue of Nintendo Power. The cover was designed by the same ad firm that had created the California Raisins commercials.
Super Mario is back. He's blasting through worlds where no one has ever been. He's taking on enemies no one else dares. This time Mario pops up power where...
The hype machine was quite effective. It had been 3 years since the original Super Mario Bros. Had been released, and everyone was ready for more Mario. The game was released in North America in October of 1988 in order to get ready for Christmas shopping. Unfortunately, things weren't as smooth as that. Earlier, I talked about the 1986 microchip pact signed between the United States and Japan. They negotiated the pact in effort to give US chip manufacturers a fighting chance. There was an unintended consequence. To prevent the dumping of low-cost chips, Japanese chip manufacturers reduced output. Yet the ability of United States manufacturers to make up the difference was overestimated. This, in part, led to a chip famine. Because of this, Nintendo had to prioritize some games over others. Games like Donkey Kong ended production to make room for new games. There were other factors as well that caused the chip famine. Japanese manufacturers had shifted their focus from SRAM, static random access memory chips, to DRAM, dynamic random access memory chips. DRAM was a growing market, so the shift in resource allocation plus the cuts in production led to a harrowing holiday experience for some.
I have to live with my kids for the rest of the year, so I have to have this on Christmas Day.
Nintendo was notorious for manufactured product shortfalls. Yet in this case, there were definite external factors. It also affected companies like Apple and HP. In one article I read from 1988, a toy store manager was quoted as saying, "It makes me sick. I ordered 144 and got 12. Millions of copies of the game were sold, and no one knew the wiser about the product switch. Not for a few years at least. Because of this conversion, there are many who hold the opinion that the game is not a real Mario game. It doesn't play like any other from the early days of the series. So what is it? Is it a port of a game, or can we consider it part of the franchise? Anything I say on this is subjective. I don't see a future in which Super Mario Bros. 2 undergoes some sort of renaissance that changes the perception of the game. And when you look at the evolution that the Mario franchise has gone through over the years from 2D to 3D, from the Mushroom Kingdom to outer space, I think that Super Mario Bros. 2 can be considered right along with the rest of them. The core of the game was based on a Mario prototype, and the Mario team designed the game. That's good enough for me. Regardless of where you fall, I hope you enjoyed taking a trip through the history of this game. My name is Kevin, and this has been Arcadeology. Take care.